Have you ever done something so small, so insignificant, that you didn't even remember it the next day? But somehow, that moment changed someone's entire life? This is the story of a woman who had everything, and a man who had nothing left. She was a powerful businesswoman, sharp, elegant, respected. He was just a beggar on the street, invisible to everyone except fate. One morning, their worlds collided over something so simple, a single piece of paper, a bill. To her, it meant nothing. To him, it became a symbol of hope. But what neither of them knew was that this small exchange, that careless moment, would start a chain of events that would test everything they believed about money, pride, and redemption. Because sometimes, destiny doesn't come knocking in grand gestures. It slips quietly into your life, disguised as a stranger's mistake. And when it does, the real question is, will you recognize it before it's too late? Stay until the end, because what begins as an argument over one bill will end as a story that proves how one act of kindness or arrogance can change everything you thought you knew about life. Have you ever thrown something away thinking it was worthless, only to realize later it was the very thing that could have changed everything? On a cold, windy morning in the city, a man sat on the curb outside a cafe. His clothes were torn, his face tired, his hands trembling from the cold. To most people walking by, he was invisible, just another beggar lost among the noise. But to him, the world wasn't silent. Every passing shoe, every rustle of paper, every car door shutting, it was a reminder of life moving forward without him. Then, as he lowered his head, a faint sound caught his attention. A small piece of paper, fluttering down the street like a lost bird, stopped right by his shoe. He bent down, picked it up carefully. It was $100 bill. At least it looked like one. Before he could even breathe, a sharp voice broke through the air. "That bill is mine." He turned around. A woman stood there, elegant, poised, and visibly irritated. Her coat screamed success, her perfume expensive, her expression ice cold. "I dropped it," she said firmly, holding out her manicured hand. He hesitated, eyes flicking between her and the bill. "Ma'am, I found it here on the street," he replied softly. "I didn't see who—" "It doesn't matter," she interrupted, her tone sharper. "Give it back." "It's mine." The people nearby paused to watch. The scene looked small, but the weight of it was heavy. A man who had nothing, and a woman who had everything, fighting over one piece of paper. Finally, the cafe manager stepped out. "Calm down, please. Nobody's taking your bill. Let's just be civil here." The woman sighed dramatically, as if she'd been insulted by the universe. "Fine," she said. "Keep it, if it means that much to you." She tossed her hair, turned around, and walked away without another glance. The man stood frozen. For a second, he didn't know what to feel. Shame, relief, or gratitude. He looked down at the bill again. His fingers trembled. Then he noticed something odd. It wasn't money at all. It was a receipt. The ink was faded, but he could still read the words. "Derma Cosmetics and Pharmacies Camilla, donation of $100 to the Women's Cancer Foundation." He let out a faint laugh, half disbelief, half irony. A useless piece of paper to her, a strange blessing to him. He folded it gently, placed it inside his worn-out wallet, the same wallet that hadn't held real money in months. Across town, that same woman, Alejandra Ruiz, sat in her office, flipping through financial reports. The walls around her gleamed white, her desk spotless, the city skyline glinting through the glass. She was everything society admired, ambitious, powerful, and polished to perfection. But under the surface, her life was cracking. Her company's expansion deal had just been rejected by the bank. The numbers didn't add up, the reports were inconsistent, and her top accountant, Paul, kept offering excuses that sounded more like cover-ups than solutions. Still, she told herself what every proud person does before everything collapses. "I can fix this." Her assistant knocked. "Ma'am," the bank called again. "They need the reports by this afternoon." Alejandra closed her eyes, pressing her temples. "Tell Paul to make sure everything's clean this time. I don't care how late he stays." She didn't know it yet, but the same hand that signed that donation receipt, the same worthless bill she'd dropped on the street, was about to come back into her life in a way she could never imagine, because the man she'd dismissed, Jose Daniel, wasn't just a beggar. He was once a financial genius, a man who'd lost everything to greed, betrayal, and a single mistake. And that crumpled piece of paper in his pocket? It wasn't just a receipt. It was a forgotten connection between two souls who were about to teach each other the real value of money, pride, and second chances. As the sun dipped behind the skyline that evening, Jose sat under the same cafe awning, tracing his finger along the faded ink of the receipt. He whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe this is how I start again." Because sometimes the smallest things we throw away are the ones destiny uses to bring us back to who we're meant to be. The morning after, the city woke up to noise and speed. People rushing, horns blaring, the smell of roasted coffee filling the air. But inside the tall glass building of Derma Cosmetics and Pharmacies, Camilla, something far quieter and far more dangerous, was brewing. Alejandra Ruiz sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the computer screen. The numbers didn't match. Again. She rubbed her temples and sighed. "Paul," she called out, her tone sharp but weary. "Can you come here, please?" Her accountant, Paul Mendoza, entered with his usual smirk, the kind that hides guilt behind fake confidence. "Yes, ma'am?" "None of these reports make sense," she said, scrolling through the files. "They're inconsistent. The bank just rejected my loan. If we can't prove stability, our new branch is gone before it even starts." Paul leaned against the chair, pretending calm. "That's impossible, ma'am. I double-checked everything myself." "Then check again," she snapped. "By this afternoon, the entire future of this company depends on those numbers." He nodded, but his eyes drifted away. There was something about the way he said yes that didn't sound like commitment. It sounded like delay. Meanwhile, just a few streets away, Jose Daniel sat on the steps of a building, staring at that same faded receipt. The words, Derma Cosmetics and Pharmacies. Camilla glimmered faintly under the sunlight. He smiled. "So that's where you belong," he murmured. He stood up, straightened his worn jacket, and began walking. He didn't know exactly what he'd do or say when he got there, but something deep inside told him. This was his moment to give back. Inside Alejandra's office, the tension grew thicker. Paul was pacing now, muttering to himself. Then the door creaked open. A guard stepped in. "Ma'am, there's a man outside asking to see you, says he has something important for you." "Who?" "He didn't say. He doesn't look like a client." Paul immediately frowned. "Send him away. We don't have time for—" Alejandra raised her hand. "Let him in." The guard hesitated, then opened the door wider. Jose Daniel stepped inside, holding a small folder close to his chest. His clothes were still shabby, but his eyes, calm, focused, and determined, carried the quiet dignity of someone who had seen both ruin and redemption. "Good morning," he said gently. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I just came to return something." Paul rolled his eyes. "Oh, great. Another charity case." Alejandra gave him a look that silenced him instantly. "What is it that you want to return?" she asked. Jose opened the folder and placed several printed sheets on the desk. "These," he said, "your company's financial statements." Alejandra's brow furrowed. "Excuse me?" "I found these near your office," he continued, "and I realized they had been altered." Paul's jaw clenched. "That's ridiculous. How could you possibly—" Jose calmly interrupted. "Because the math doesn't lie, sir." Alejandra leaned forward. "Explain." He pointed to the paper, his voice firm but respectful. You reported an income of $27,187.68. The 12% should have been applied to supplier costs, not sales tax. The real total is $25,573.73. In February, your reported profit was $240 when it should have been $2,400. Basic arithmetic, too basic for this to be a simple mistake. Silence. Paul tried to laugh it off. You expect us to believe a street man knows accounting? Jose didn't flinch. I used to be a financial director, sir, until I learned what happens when ambition blinds ethics. The air froze. Alejandra's eyes softened just slightly. For a moment, she didn't see a beggar. She saw a man who had once stood where she was, behind numbers, pressure, and pride. Where did you get these? She asked quietly. They were left outside by mistake, he replied. Your accountant took them from me when I came to deliver them back. I thought you should know. Alejandra turned sharply toward Paul. Is that true? He stammered. Ma'am, with all due respect, he's lying. I've never... Enough, she interrupted. If you're telling the truth, then you have nothing to fear when I verify this. Her tone carried authority now, the kind that made even guilty men sweat. Jose began backing toward the door. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought, maybe the truth still matters somewhere. Before he could leave, she called out, Wait. She opened her purse, pulled out some bills, and extended her hand. Here, take this, at least for your honesty. He shook his head gently. Thank you, he said. But I'm not here for money. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded donation receipt, the same one she had dropped days ago, and placed it on her desk. Sometimes, he said softly, we forget the things that once made us human. Alejandra stared at the paper, the symbol of a kindness she had long stopped practicing. For a brief second, the walls of pride she had built around herself began to crack. Wait, what's your name? She asked. He smiled faintly. Jose Daniel. Then he turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind silence and a truth no report could erase. That night, Alejandra couldn't sleep. The numbers in the reports weren't the only ones that didn't add up anymore. Her conscience didn't either, because sometimes it isn't the math that's broken, it's the people doing the counting. The next morning, the sky was gray, the kind of color that makes even coffee taste bitter. Alejandra sat in her office staring at the window without seeing anything. Her mind replayed yesterday's encounter over and over, the words of that man. Sometimes we forget the things that once made us human, echoed in her chest like an accusation she couldn't shake. Paul entered, his usual fake charm plastered across his face. Good morning, ma'am. I've rechecked everything. The numbers are fixed now. She didn't turn around. Paul, she said quietly, tell me the truth. Did you alter the reports? He froze just for a second. Then, with the smoothness of a practiced liar, he replied, Of course not, ma'am. I would never do that. She turned to face him. Funny, she said, because that beggar you told me to ignore knew every mistake in those reports. Every single one. Paul's mask cracked. You're seriously trusting the word of a homeless man? Her eyes sharpened. Sometimes, the truth comes from where we least expect it. An hour later, her phone buzzed. It was Andrea, her business partner and investor in the new branch of Derma Cosmetics. Alejandra, we need to talk, Andrea said, her voice firm but strained. There's a problem with the expansion contract. What kind of problem? Damaris claims the funds have already been transferred, but I haven't received the documents from your side. Alejandra's stomach dropped. That's not possible. I've been waiting for bank approval. Well, Andrea sighed. According to Damaris, the loan was already denied. She even showed me the rejection email. Alejandra's hand tightened around her phone. She's lying. Andrea's voice softened. Then prove it. You have 48 hours, Alejandra. Otherwise, the deal goes to her. The line went dead. That evening, Alejandra burst into Paul's office, slamming the door behind her. Why didn't you tell me the bank denied my loan? She demanded. Paul tried to act confused. Because I didn't know? You're lying, she snapped. You've been feeding Damaris information about this company, haven't you? Paul's face hardened. Careful, ma'am. That's a serious accusation. Not as serious as fraud, she replied coldly. You're done here, Paul. Get out. He smirked, leaning forward. You'll regret this. No one will work with you again. Maybe, she said, but at least I'll lose with integrity. Hours later, as Alejandra sat alone in her dimly lit office, she heard a soft knock. It was Jose Daniel, dressed differently this time. His shirt was clean, his hair combed back, still simple but with quiet dignity. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know, he replied, but I heard you're in trouble, and I think I can help. Alejandra exhaled. You're not exactly on my payroll. No, he smiled faintly, but I used to handle payrolls far larger than yours. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? He paused, then spoke slowly, the words carrying years of regret. Before I lost everything, I owned 3 companies. I had money, contacts, respect, until I gambled them away on bad partnerships and greed. I believed success meant never losing, but life taught me that sometimes losing everything is how you finally win yourself back. Alejandra looked at him, uncertain. And now you help strangers for free? He chuckled softly. Let's just say I'm repaying a debt to humanity and to myself. She hesitated, then placed a folder on the desk. These are my financial statements. If you really want to help, prove to me I'm not crazy to trust a stranger. Jose opened the folder, scanning the numbers with calm precision. Within minutes, he spotted the problem and the pattern. He looked up. This isn't an accounting error, it's deliberate sabotage. Damaris and your accountant have been moving small amounts to ghost accounts, tiny enough not to trigger suspicion. Alejandra felt her chest tighten. They used my trust against me. He nodded. They always do, ma'am. People like us. We believe loyalty has a price, but some people sell it cheaper than we ever imagined. She leaned back, tears welling. I don't even know who to believe anymore. He looked at her with gentle firmness. Then believe the numbers. They never lie. For the first time in days, Alejandra smiled, a sad, tired smile, but real. You're hired, she said quietly. He blinked. What? I need someone who knows how to rebuild what's broken, she said. And I think you do. He hesitated. I'm not looking for a job. Then think of it as redemption, she whispered, for both of us. That night, the two of them sat together under the office lamp, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. Jose recalculated every transaction, tracing every hidden leak. Alejandra wrote notes, occasionally glancing at him, at his steady hands, his calm eyes, his quiet way of carrying pain without bitterness. You could have been one of the greats, she said softly. He smiled without looking up. I was once, but I let pride become my business partner. That was my biggest mistake. Then why are you helping me now? She asked. He looked up and met her gaze. Because I see the same storm in you that once drowned me, and I can't watch someone else lose everything they worked for, not when I can help them swim. The clock ticked past midnight. The city outside was silent, but inside that small office, 2 souls, one broken by success, one betrayed by it, began to build something new. Not a company, not a contract, but trust. And trust, once earned, can turn even strangers into allies. By sunrise, the first light poured through the blinds. The reports were complete. Every error corrected, every lie exposed. Alejandra poured him a cup of coffee and smiled. You know, you look much better in that shirt than in the streets. He grinned. And you look better when you're not trying to control the world. For the first time in years, Alejandra laughed, really laughed. And in that laughter, the world seemed less cruel, less cold, Because sometimes the right person doesn't just fix your numbers, they fix your faith in people. The morning of the meeting arrived with the weight of destiny. Alejandra stood before the mirror, adjusting her jacket for the 100th time. She wasn't just dressing for business, she was dressing for war. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the same woman who once dismissed a man on the street. This Alejandra carried scars of humility, fear, and hope, all stitched together by the quiet courage of the night before. "Are you ready?" Jose asked softly, standing at the door. She turned and smiled faintly. "No, but I'm going anyway." They both knew what was at stake: the company, her name, and the truth. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with perfume, coffee, and concealed hostility. Andrea, the investor, sat at the head of the table. Her eyes darted between Alejandra and Damaris, the rival partner who sat with smug confidence, Paul by her side. "Let's begin," Andrea said briskly. "I assume you've all come prepared." Damaris leaned forward, flashing her rehearsed smile. "Of course. We're only here to settle what's already clear, that Alejandra's project has failed. The financial inconsistencies prove that she mishandled the funds. I've already prepared documentation for a full transfer of the new branch to my ownership." Andrea looked at Alejandra. "Do you have anything to say?" Alejandra inhaled deeply. "Yes," she said. "I want the truth to speak for itself." The door opened quietly. Jose Daniel stepped in, dressed in a simple suit. His presence silenced the room instantly. Paul frowned. "What is he doing here?" Alejandra replied, her tone calm but firm. "He's here because he knows what you don't, the truth hidden inside those numbers." Jose walked toward the table, placing a small folder in front of Andrea. "I was asked to verify the company's reports," he said, "and I found something remarkable." He opened the folder, revealing printed spreadsheets and highlighted figures. For example, a revenue of $27,887 was reported, but the 12% was applied to sales tax instead of supplier costs. That reduced the net credit artificially, making it look like the company was underperforming. The correct value was $25,573. Andrea's eyes widened slightly. "Go on." He turned another page. A separate order, S1847, shows a $10,000 payment to a company called Dermo Solutions. The problem is, that company doesn't exist. The tax ID belongs to an inactive entity divided into 3 smaller shells. The merchandise never arrived. It's a clean case of embezzlement. Paul's voice cracked. "That's absurd." Jose's gaze was steady. "You made it too perfect, Mr. Mendoza, but numbers, they don't lie, and I don't either." Damaris slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. He's a nobody, a man from the street." Alejandra stood, her voice cutting through the room. "A man who knows more about honesty than both of you combined." Andrea turned toward Damaris. "Is this true?" Damaris tried to compose herself. "Of course not. She's making this up to save her project." Then Jose pulled out his final piece of evidence, a small flash drive. "Inside this," he said quietly, "are transaction logs, emails, and transfer records between Mr. Mendoza and Ms. Damaris. They plan to sabotage the reports, block the loan, and acquire the branch under false pretenses." Andrea froze. "Do you have proof?" Jose nodded. "Would you like to see the message where Paul wrote, 'Once the bank rejects her, the deal is ours'?" Silence fell. Paul's face turned pale. Damaris looked away. Andrea finally spoke, her voice cold as marble. "Officers, please escort these 2 out of my office. I'll be forwarding this evidence to the authorities." Paul stood abruptly. "You can't do this. I know my rights." Andrea's voice didn't waver. "And I know mine. You tried to destroy someone's career. Now you'll watch her rebuild it." The guards led them away, their protests echoing down the corridor. After the room emptied, Andrea turned to Alejandra. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. "I doubted you. I shouldn't have." Alejandra smiled faintly. Don't apologize. Doubt is the tax we pay for trust. Andrea reached across the table, shaking her hand. The branch will be under your name, effective immediately. Tears welled in Alejandra's eyes. Thank you, truly. Then Andrea smiled knowingly. And him? She asked, glancing at Jose. Alejandra turned toward him. He stays. Jose looked surprised. Are you sure? I'm sure, she replied, because I've learned that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who save us. Later that afternoon, as the office quieted, Alejandra found herself standing by the window again. The sun was setting, painting the city gold. Jose approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. Double sugar, right? He teased. She laughed softly. You remember? He handed her the cup. You know, he said, when I first met you, I thought that bill you dropped was just a mistake. Now I think it was fate. She turned toward him, her eyes gentle. Maybe it was both. There was a pause, the kind that only exists between 2 people who understand each other without needing words. Then she whispered, Thank you, Jose, for helping me see what really mattered. He smiled. You already knew. You just needed someone to remind you. She looked down at the framed receipt sitting on her desk, the same crumpled piece of paper he'd once returned. Now, under the light of forgiveness, it gleamed like something holy. As they stood there, the city lights flickered to life below. She whispered, almost to herself, one bill didn't just change his life, it changed mine too. And somewhere deep inside that truth, a lesson remained. Sometimes, the richest people aren't the ones with money. They're the ones who remember what it means to be human. At the end of it all, the numbers were fixed, the truth was revealed, and justice was served. But the most powerful change didn't happen in the courtroom or in the company's balance sheets. It happened in 2 human hearts. Alejandra, the woman who once believed success was everything, learned that humility is worth far more than pride. And Jose Daniel, the man who had lost it all, proved that integrity doesn't vanish when fortune does. That single piece of paper, once worthless and forgotten, became a symbol of everything they'd both lost and found again. It wasn't just a receipt, it was redemption printed in ink. Because sometimes it's not the money that changes a life. It's the courage to do what's right, even when no one's watching. Maybe that's why they say, you don't need to be rich to give something valuable. You just need a heart that remembers what it means to be human. So tonight, as you finish watching this story, ask yourself, what bill have you dropped lately? A moment you dismissed? A person you ignored? Because you never know. That one forgotten act could be the very thing that changes someone's entire world, and maybe even yours. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Leave a comment below. Tell us what part moved you the most. Click like to keep more stories like this alive and share it with someone who might need a reminder that miracles still happen, often in the smallest, most unexpected ways. Because in the end, it's not about who has more. It's about who gives more.